Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppelliser.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. Is everybody doing good? Everything is good here. I have to make my weather commentary. It's getting hot. Yay! Yeah, it's getting hot. It's May, but it's getting hot. How's this? Remember, I live in Florida, but northern Florida a little bit. But even though technically we're not in summer yet, it's like forget the technically part. All right. But besides that, it's okay. Um, my tomato plants are doing good. Yeah. I haven't killed them. My potatoes are coming up. Like I said, I got to stick to simple stuff. Tomatoes, potatoes. Because if not, and you know what's really funny? The other day I visited my son's house. He lives in another one of my other houses because that's what you do with your kids. You let them run you over, I'm only kidding, even when they're adults. But anyway, he's my he's my farmer kid. He's got bees and he's got plants. And I hadn't gone there by down. I went down to Miami and he's got this big. I went down in the yard, and I'm not kidding. He's got this big tub of this huge tomato plant. This thing has got tomatoes, and I'm like, Brandon, I don't know how he does it. I believe it. So they say some people are born with green thumbs. Well, one of my kids was born with a green thumb. You leave it up to me. My husband calls me the orchid killer. I gave that up on that, even though I've got one that's flowering. But yeah, and it's like I'm looking at it, and he's got it outside, and it's like, shh, and I was like, oh, all right, okay. At least somebody got the green thumb gene in the family. But anyway, besides that, that's all good. And people ask me to comment on the chicks, my 12 chicks. Everybody's still good, alive. They're eating well, and no, that's about it. Anybody that's had chickens before knows that when you get these very small hatchlings, you got to be real careful with them because sometimes, for no reason, they'll just go and just die on you. That's the way it is. But no, so far my dozen are good and they feathered out. And I gotta feed them because they're like always hungry, so that's always a good sign. That yeah, I've said it before. Whenever you have an animal and it stops eating, it's like oh. So yeah. Besides that, yeah, everything is good. Again, I will state it and restate it. Ordinary and dull is underrated. Sometimes it's a perfect thing. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. And the good part is who is our guest today at Stories of the Supernatural. This is her first time here. Her name is Penelope Smith. She is a founding pioneer of interspecies telepathic communication, and she's practiced professionally since the 1970s. She's communicated with animals telepathically throughout her life, and she discovered this in 1971 that animals could be relieved of emotional traumas and other problems through the same counseling techniques that helped humans. Her training and experience include bachelor's and master's degrees in the social sciences, years of training and experience in human counseling, nutrition, and holistic body energy balancing methods, research into animal nutrition, anatomy, behavior, and care, and her firsthand education from the thousands of animals she has contacted. She's published some of the first and now classic books and audio recordings in the field. The tried and true telepathic communication techniques she developed are widely used by others in the field. Her students affectionately call her the grandmother of interspecies telepathic communication. A legendary teacher, she helped launch the careers of professional animal communicators around the world. Penelope feels that the sacred connection made through telepathic communications with other species is essential for human wholeness. She believes everyone is born with the power to communicate with other species and that we all can rediscover the ability for the benefit of all beings on earth. Help me welcome her. How are you doing today, Penelope?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Marlene. Fun listening to you.
Oh yeah. By the way, I'm gonna interject since we're gonna talk on on the thing of animals. Today I was, as you can tell, I'm an animal lover myself. And I read this article that there's a marine park in France called Marineland Antibes where they've abandoned the dolphins and the killer whales, the orcas there since January. Okay. I had no you know what? It always you always think that when these places, these shows like, or where they have these animals, whatever they are, if you're going to close down, you donate or transport these animals somewhere, you know, and they've left them there. They've left them there. And I hadn't heard about this. And I was like, okay, so which of these big, huge water parks or somebody with a lot of money is going to do for these poor animals? They're in these huge tanks because I don't know how old the park is, but I was like, I was astonished. I couldn't believe that. And how's this? I was surprised that I would think that the government would say, no, you can't do that. You can't just leave animals like this. You either got to find a home for them, donate it, or and in some cases, I know that some of these they can't be released into the wild because they don't know how to survive in the wild. But I'll tell you what, rather than leaving them trapped in these huge holding pens that they had, yeah, at least give them a chance. If you can't, but yeah, I wanted to put my 2 cents worth in here, Penelope, because I thought that was very heartless when when
Yeah,
I read stories like that. You know that they
yeah,
made probably a lot of money off these animals, and I'm not saying anything against the parks per se, but that the least they could do is do right by these animals. At once they had to close their doors.
of course.
You know, I was very surprised with that. So I'm gonna keep an eye on that. By the way, you guys, I'm talking to my audience. Yes, I'm gonna keep an eye on that, and I'm hoping that they're gonna do right. And because I'm thinking, what may probably the fish, when I say, considering there's a marine land, the fish they could probably release back into the sea, into the ocean. But the orcas and the dolphins, some of them, I don't know. I don't know what the history is on these animals. I don't know. But anyway, you know what you're mentioning here that how did you realize that you could communicate with animals, Penelope?
Well, I've always communicated with animals. I didn't have any particular point of realization as a child. I just always knew that they were just like me. We were fellow
Okay.
beings and they were
Okay.
intelligent and we could communicate with each other. And when I was told it was my imagination, I decided that I was not going to abandon my animal friends.
Okay.
And I would continue, but just keep it quiet, keep it as my own thing, because
Hmm.
obviously other people were not tuned in.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, that, and you hear that from a lot from kids when they're younger, when they whatever they realize, you know what, I'm gonna keep my mouth closed on this because either you get a look or you're like told, no, you like you said, oh, it's just your,
Yeah,
oh, what a lively imagination she has.
yeah, exactly.
And what can I ask you, what was the first animal that you realized was it like a domesticated animal, or that you started realizing that the communication was possible?
Well, I remember sitting, I had domesticated animals in our family, dogs and
Mm-hmm.
cats and parakeets and fish. And so I always was close to them. But I remember most as a child sitting with the wild animals. I mean, I was
Okay.
in a city in Chicago but we had little parks and I would just go and sit really quietly and asked the birds to come to me and asked the snakes, which were garter
Right.
snakes and,
Mm-hmm.
little snakes like that, asked them to come out and insects and asked them to come out. I'd go to the side in the bushes where no one could
Right.
see me and just ask the animals to come out. And it would be like a little picnic together. We just sit there
Wow.
and communicate with each other and they'd come down. I told them, you don't have to be afraid of me. And
Okay.
and squirrels. And I just remember that very clearly because that was my own special experience. I couldn't, of course, tell anybody about because they
Sure.
would just make fun of it.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I understand that completely. Yes. Yes. That must that's so neat. That's so neat because that's like beyond just like liking animals or, or
Yeah, and
appreciating
it's a
animals.
net. The thing is, it's a natural thing. We're
Yeah.
socialized out of it in our Western culture.
Hmm.
But you look at indigenous cultures, they're not socialized out of it. You know,
Yes.
they just
Yes.
continue to communicate and regard it as a very natural thing because it is. But we
Sure.
get very much into the only language that's valid is human spoken language. And
Sure.
so what happens is we forget that we also get the thoughts and feelings behind the words, which is telepathy. And
Yes.
we, even with people, we know what they're feeling, we know even what they're thinking sometimes when it's not what their words are saying.
Yes. Yes.
We're getting it, but we deny it.
Right. You
It's not
there's how's it like an unspoken, how's this kind of like,
intuition. Yes.
yeah, that
Yeah.
like you say
Yeah.
it's not just the words as far as
It's the
communication goes.
energy, it's the
Yeah.
emotion, it's the feeling. And so this is very natural to all animals. And so it's very easy to communicate with other animals telepathically. With
Hmm.
humans, you have to regard conventions, you know.
Sure. Yeah, 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 yeah. My husband loves because sometimes I'm out there with my birds and I'm like, don't look at me with that face, especially if I've been late feeding them, and he's like, there she goes, because it's and it's like because like you said, sometimes you even by the way they look at you, you're like, oh, I know what you want. I'm late with your food. Hold on,
Yeah.
But it's which everybody is familiar with the story of Dr. Dolittle, that he had that ability, and it's always been seen as and that more modern movie with Robert Redford, The Horse Whisperer, which
Yeah.
is that you have the ability with certain animals to like they listen to you or vice versa, whatever the
Mhm.
case might be. And so here you're growing up, which by the way, which is when a lot of kids just forget about it or lose
Yes.
interest. What happened with you? You
Well, again, I was really different. I was a very spiritual child. I was
okay,
aware of that. I was a spiritual being. I was aware that other people were not aware of that. So I
right,
had to keep a lot of things quiet and to
okay,
myself. And so anything that I said, like talking to the animals or talking to the nature spirits, because I would
mm-hmm,
also be in touch with the fairies or with beings who were not in their bodies, I would be aware of them. This was all regarded as nonsense. So I just learned to keep it all to myself. And I was not close to other children. I came
mm-hmm,
from a very abusive background. So everything was kind of confined anyway. You sort of
okay,
had to keep a lot to yourself and hope you
mm-hmm,
could make it through. And so to me, this was a treasure. And it was what got me through my ability to telepathically communicate and to pray and to with the saints and angels as well as with the animals and all the beings on earth. To me, it was a saving grace. And I looked around and I saw that a lot of people, particularly in my parents, were very, very miserable, because they
right,
were not aware of themselves as spiritual beings. So I said, that isn't what I'm here for. I'm
okay,
here. Well, as a little girl, I said, I'm here to
right,
save the world. That's how I phrased
sure,
it.
sure, and I
Of course,
think
I'm here to save the world. I'm going to help everybody.
yeah,
And, but as I grew up, I rephrased it, as okay, I'm going to help people to awaken, to be happier,
mm-hmm,
to help them get through their traumas, help them get through their confusion and the pain that causes them. And so I just, because I had these abilities, it kind of came naturally to start to use my ability to communicate with animals. When I became a counselor for people, I just found animals were so responsive. So I could
okay, because
telepathically communicate with them.
you went into
Yeah,
as when you became an
human
adult, you went into
counseling.
the
Yes,
counseling.
yes.
Okay,
And I
okay,
felt,
okay,
that it was very helpful to people. It was spiritual counseling was oriented to them as a whole being rather than just, Freudian counseling. It was more about their spiritual path and how they could grow. And so, and get through traumas, get through the stuff that, and beliefs that hold them back. And so I started applying it to animals, and the results were absolutely fantastic. The animals would change so rapidly. They would listen, they
Okay.
would assimilate it so rapidly, where people had a lot of barriers. They had a lot of fears,
Sure.
doubts, mental baggage that the
Mm-hmm.
animals did not have. So the animals would say, you know, sure, I'll tell you about this, and yeah, I want help, and they just start rolling things
Right.
out very quickly. And so I went, wow, this this is astounding. And I always loved animals, so I went,
Mm-hmm.
you know, my mission is to help people to awaken. And I said, you know, this is so perfect for that, because people love their animals.
Sure.
And when you tell them and show them that their animals understand, that their animals are spiritual beings, that their animals are aware beings, people start to realize things about themselves. They go, oh, and then they change. I mean, I could see people shifting
Mm-hmm.
so rapidly, and I went, you know, this is the way to go. And I just started orienting myself more and more toward the animal communication, because I saw it worked. You know, I had to test it out for a while with various people and their animal friends. And then I went, you know what? This is just too good. And the people wanted me to teach them, and
Right.
they wanted me. And so I did a lot of media appearances, radio,
Okay.
TV, newspapers, magazines. This was in the 70s. So a whole different thing than now.
Sure.
And, but it got the word out, and there were a few other people doing this, but I was the one who focused on education and waking it up in other people, not just helping other people and their animal friends, but leaving them ignorant.
Let me
I
ask
mean,
you something.
to
Do
me,
you think that this shift, like you said, this was in the 70s?
yeah.
Do you, and I'm sure you've seen, everybody now has got a therapy animal. You know, it's like, and I don't care. I'm good with that. I don't have any problem. You know, before, you know, you only used to see service animals as in
Yeah.
service animals. You know, those were few and far between, and I have to laugh because some of these animals, I'm looking at them, you know, with their little blanket, especially if they're older, and it's like, that's no service animal, but okay, I get it
Yeah.
because I've got 8 dogs underneath me right now, so I get it. You know, so, you know, but it's so funny because it's like I get the therapy part though.
Yeah.
I see how what animals do for humans as
They
far
support
as
people
yes,
so beautifully, and without all the questions that people have,
sure.
without all
Mm-hmm.
the judgments. And so they're in a different place. You know, they
Yes.
recognize themselves as spiritual beings living an experience. So they go, okay, I'll help you. I'm here to help
Yeah.
you too. I'm here
Yes.
to enjoy my life, and I'll help you too. So they just put out their love, or just their presence, you know, just even
Yes.
when an animal is very traumatized and they can't respond with
Yeah.
full trust because they've been abused before,
Mm-hmm.
even then you feel the comfort of their
Yes.
being. And of course, it draws you out to help them, while they are helping you too, as
Yes.
they are
Yes.
growing into through their traumas. Because again, that's how I learned animals respond so well, because they had traumas. And
Right.
then they
Right.
responded so well to relieving their traumas and growing in trust. You know, it takes time, but it's you can sort of jumpstart the whole process when you do the counseling and the healing with them. You can take chunks out at a time, and then they can continue to grow with their person, because people and their animals have a spiritual journey together. They're growing together.
Yes.
They're helping each other.
Yep.
And so it's an incredibly beautiful thing, the relationship. And so
Oh yeah.
that
Oh yeah.
people are recognizing that, and emotional support, that animals give them emotional support. I go, well, yes, and
Yeah.
they've been doing that always.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, you've seen even in some disasters, people have refused to leave if they can't take their animal with them.
Yeah,
They've stayed behind with the animal, or if they leave, they can't. You know, they take the animal. In some cases, I've heard of people just not. I'm not. I can't take my animal. I'm not leaving. You know, they've
yeah,
even had rescuers say, "Hey, you know, we're gonna pick you up on a boat, and but you can't take the animal." And they're like, "No, I'm not leaving if I can't take
yeah,
my animal with me."
yeah,
So yeah, and
yeah.
that's
No,
that's a bond that's I think because of what you're speaking
it's a
about.
beautiful thing. It's a soul heart bond.
Mm-hmm.
And, often people may not be able to definitely express it or intellectualize it, but it's really more about that we understand each other, intuitively without having to
Yes.
even speak. And that's so important. That's so, how when you love somebody and you live with them, oftentimes you don't speak as much as you did when you first met each other because
Sure.
you don't have to.
Yeah.
You understand each other, and there's that telepathic connection, and so your
Yeah.
husband or your partner
Yeah.
just understands you. And so you have that with your animal friends. Are you going to leave that? That's why I said when I was a little girl, even at the time in history when people considered animals things,
Right.
disposables.
Yes.
That's why I don't even
Yes.
use the word pet, because pet is, oh, well, they're my thing, for
Right.
me to do with what I want. Well, they aren't. They're
No,
your
of course not.
companion, they're your friend, your family, a whole different thing.
Oh
And
yeah.
so now it's a whole different orientation to animals, to regard them as fellow beings. And it can change the world. If you regard
Yes.
animals that way, and you regard plants that way, and the earth that way, how different people act
Oh sure. Of course. Of course.
when they
Absolutely.
regard that there's a soul there, that there's a
Yes.
heart there, that being understands and cares for you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. That we're all
totally
part of the
beautiful.
same complex. Yeah. We might be different
Exactly.
life forms in the sense of humans versus, an animal or a plant or
Yeah.
whatever. But I agree. We're.
It comes down to, what really means something in life. It isn't your ideas. It comes
Hmm.
down to the feelings you have in the relationships. So it comes down to kindness, understanding, loving care. Those are the things that really matter to people in the end. Sure, they may
Sure.
get caught up in money, or they may get caught
Yeah.
up in status, or they may get caught up in this, but that's simply being caught up. It's
Yeah.
not what really gives you nutrition,
No, of
you
course.
know?
No, yeah, 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 yes. I absolutely agree. It doesn't
Yeah,
feed your soul. It doesn't. A lot of
yeah.
people think that, and and some of them, they think, oh, when I get whatever it is, fill in the blank, that car, that house, that fur
Yeah,
coat, whatever, I don't care. And then when they get it, they're like, okay, so when does the happiness start? And it's like, wrong.
yeah,
They get fooled into thinking, especially materialistic things,
yeah.
and don't get me wrong. I like nice things, but there's an understanding, like if your soul is hungering for something, whether it's happiness or fulfillment or whatever, you know, thinking you're gonna get it from an inanimate object, you're gonna be kind of disappointed, I think,
Yeah,
eventually.
yeah,
And I think that, and I also want to say that some with this thing with the animals, that sometimes people have become very, how's this, distrusting of other humans.
mm,
So the animal is more trustworthy. How's that?
yeah,
Like the
definitely.
animal, you know exactly what the
Yeah,
animal is about.
yeah.
You know,
And then, well, they call a spade a spade.
right? They're
They
not
show you,
hypocritical. Right.
this is
Yeah.
what I need. This is what works for me. This is
Yes.
how I feel. And so you always feel safe,
Yeah. Yeah. Be-
because they're showing you exactly what it is. And I feel that the good human relationships have that quality to them
sure.
too,
Sure.
where you just call a spade a spade. You don't have to hide things, you don't have to
Right.
be something else. You just relate to each other, heart to heart, soul to soul. You're a very easy person to talk with, because you have that kind of
Oh,
connection, easy, warm,
oh,
very
yeah. I mean,
heartful connection. And this is what we look for. This is what we long
yes.
for. So we get it
Yes.
with our animal friends, and they're happy to respond to that.
Oh, yeah.
They're grateful too. It's
Oh, yeah.
reciprocal.
Oh no, I tell everybody. I've even taken a video. I'm taking a shower and I look and I have a little audience of dogs looking at me, and they'll wander, they'll leave the bathroom, go out, then come back and look at me. It's like, well, I'm not going anywhere, you guys. But they're all like, just in case, you know what, I go down I don't know, the drain. But it's so funny because they take turns and they'll hang out and they'll lie down. I have this,
It's so sweet.
water towel,
It's so
and they'll sit
sweet. They're
there,
taking
and
care
then
of
some
you.
leave and then they come back and they look at me, done yet? And obviously, and I take a shower every day, so they're there. Same thing, the morning I let them out, they're running around. But if I have to step back in, because usually I wait out there while they do their thing, and I'm just, but sometimes the phone will ring, something, you know, and I leave the door open. All of a sudden, I look behind me, and they're all looking at me. It's like, okay, I'm here. No, like in other words, if they have line of sight of me, it's all good. They'll
Yeah.
want, they'll do their thing. But if I go, it's almost like, and I think that's so sweet,
Yeah,
because
and it's part of their purpose. They want to
yes,
fulfill their purpose to make sure that you're okay,
yeah, yeah, and
you
it's
know?
even though there's nothing alarming. Let me ask you something, Penelope. Something that I'm always, do you think animals reincarnate and come back to you in
Oh,
another?
yeah. Definitely.
Yes.
Yes, I've had very much experience with this, both my own animal
Mm-hmm.
friends and with
Okay.
many, many clients. So
Okay.
it's very common. An animal will live, say, your dog, 15 years or something. I had one
Right.
dog say to me, 15 years is not enough. I'm coming back to you because
Okay.
we need to continue our journey together. And I
Yes.
want to take care of you. I want to look after you. And I just went, wow, this is so wonderful.
Yes. Yes.
So,
I do.
so
I personally believe that. I think
yeah,
that animals come back to you
yeah,
one way or the other.
yeah,
Um, and I think sometimes, because people will say, well, maybe when you get another dog, you're priming yourself. And I say, no, you know what? In my experience, the animal comes to you in unexpected ways.
mhm,
In other words, it's not, like when people they lose an animal and then they do go try to find a replacement, which is not,
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with it, but this is not when you're looking for a
right,
replacement or
right,
another animal that looks like it.
yeah.
Somehow it just ends up with you through some weird reason.
Well,
Somehow,
that's when you're connected.
unexpectedly.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
you stay connected to the spiritual connection, the
Yes.
animal will show you in different ways if they're coming back to you or if
Yes.
they're helping you find somebody for you. But when you
Yes.
go from a materialistic point of view, like, oh, I want this certain kind of dog or I want them to
Yes.
look this way, you're going in an objective point of view.
Right.
It's not necessarily going to be the right thing for you, and there's
Right.
going to be some hardship there. And again, it's all part of your things that you need to learn in this life.
Right.
But if you
Right.
just follow the connection, I write these in my books, my books on animals and spirit, on animal death. I write how animals show you various ways and where to go. Well, I get direct messages. They say, okay, now look in the paper and look exactly here, or look up at Craigslist, or go to the Humane Society, or go here, go there.
Mm-hmm.
And there they are. And I know exactly, and they
Yes.
guide you. And if you follow that guidance, then you get the exact right match. It just is
Yes.
so incredibly
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes. Yes. It comes like, and that's happened to me on more than one occasion because I've
Yeah.
always had animals, always all my life.
Mm,
Um, that as far as that they find a way back to you somehow or other. Like
yeah.
they find a way to like, and sometimes there's something about them that it's a giveaway that this is who that is. You look at them and you're
Exactly.
like, ah,
You just
yeah,
know.
you
Yeah,
just know. You just know that.
exactly.
Let me ask you, what do you think about, and I hadn't really realized that they were doing these, and obviously you need a lot of money to do this, is that people that have cloned, let's say like a dog, and I was like, oh, I don't know about that. What do you think about that?
Well, again, your motivation, if you're motivated out of desperation,
Sure.
it again is a very difficult thing. When you follow desperation or fear, or instead of following what is right for you and what is right for
Right.
the animal, again, I cannot comment on in a generality because each individual case is going to be different. Whatever people are doing, there's something in it that they're going to learn from.
I
It's
just think
part of
that, yeah, you
it's
could
part of their
clone,
journey.
right? You could clone the animal to look at, well, obviously exactly like the one you had before, but at the same time, I think you're not going to get the same animal as
Well,
in the
and
spirit. And
again,
it's
it
like,
could be a possibility then that that spirit who is waiting to come back to you says, "Okay, fine. You set up this body. I'll
okay,
come in."
fifty
You
thousand
know,
dollars later,
but you don't have to do that.
thanks.
You can go to your local humane society,
Thank
adopt an
you,
animal
thank you.
where
Yes,
where the animal, the being who was your friend a few years ago says,
yes,
right, go right now, and
yeah,
I'm there, and I have black fur and a funny little marking on my face, and there's the dog.
Yes,
if you
that's all I'm
listen,
saying. I would be like,
they'll
okay,
guide you there. And I mean, I'm definitely into helping animals, adopting animals who need rescuing, and it's wonderful. And to me, I'm not into, well, I must have this certain kind of
oh no.
body. And I'm always delighted by how they appear. I go, well, this is interesting. I never thought I'd have
All my dogs are rescues. All. As a matter of fact, I got one extra one time. Some people posted there's a little white like poodle looking dog, and you know how people posted up, hey, we found this dog in this area. And I had one that had just passed away. One of those, when your children get a dog and then
Yeah.
somehow or other you inherit it. But anyway, my one of my dogs that had him for a really long time and he passed away. A few months had gone by. I said, well, so they post up, hey, we found this dog in this thing. If anybody. So I contacted, I said, look, if you cannot find the owner, let me know. I have a space for her. 3 weeks later, sure enough, they called me and they said, look, we took her to the vet. She has a chip, but no information. We've posted up posters in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
We can't keep her. We have one dog. We can't keep her. Do you want her? I said, sure. So I went, I met them, nice people. And all of a sudden, like about 2 weeks later, I'm looking at her and I'm like, you know what? You're trying to look a little bit round in the stomach area. Sure enough, there she was. Now I know what she was doing when she got out of her yard. She was well taken care of. That was the thing.
Yeah.
She hadn't been on the street long, but
Yeah.
she got, I don't know. Sure enough, she was pregnant. And she had two puppies. I lost one because I don't know who she got together with. I think it was some type of brown lab or something. I kept one of them, my Bubba boy. He's here. But yeah, it was one of those things when you get a rescue and then you get like more, and it's like, hey. But yeah, that's things that happens. That again, one of those things that you don't plan on it,
Yeah.
and it just goes in that
But
direction, and then you end
meant to
up in
be, and then
yeah,
because you have a very positive attitude, you just go, well, this is more love. This is
yeah, that's
great.
fine, that's fine,
Fantastic.
that's fine. As a matter of fact, I even have. I'm such a dweeb. The vet that I took her to, he showed he I even have like well, they did like an expert, but really it's like what they do with pregnant women, which is the scan which just shows the two puppies in there.
Mhm.
I still have that there, like here it is, like people show off and I was like, okay, I'm getting carried away here, but yeah, let me ask you, because nowadays, as far as I don't know where you live now or where you've lived, have you had access to wildlife because I think
Yes.
that what you were doing as a kid, that was great,
Yeah, well,
you know.
I live in a rural area. I'm in the
Mm-hmm.
Sonoran Desert north of Phoenix, and
Right.
I am surrounded by animals. And I look out my
Okay.
window and I see the mountains and the trees, and then there are all kinds of critters. So
Yes.
I have to be. I mean, it's part of my um, being to be
Yes.
around wild animals. I would not be in a natural
Right.
area. It's just what nurtures me.
Have you had animals, and what I'm going to, have you had any wildlife come to you for help?
Yes. Yes, I've had that happen throughout my life, actually, where
Mm-hmm.
they've either come for help or they need help. I
Right.
come across them and they need help, and sometimes I can help them, and sometimes I cannot.
Sure.
Sometimes the help is just to help them transition. That
Right.
they're
Right.
hurt, they've been hit by a car and they're
Mm-hmm.
badly hurt, and just to help them lift out of their bodies because they're
Yes.
very, very damaged. And other times
Yes.
it's a matter of, well, we can do something for them physically, but sometimes you can't with animals
Right.
that have been badly injured.
Right. Right. I know that sometimes animals,
But it's okay because they lift out of their bodies and they look around and they go, okay, well, I think I'll be a deer again. That didn't end so well, but okay, that was the way it was. I'll get a new body and enjoy that. I really love being a deer.
right.
And just watch for the headlights.
Right.
Just
Exactly.
don't cross when you see those headlights. Don't let yourself get confused and dash out. Doesn't work. Remember that.
Right, right, right. And exactly, it's not and I want to say it's like, and you would think, okay, this is an animal thing. None of the angst, like, oh, why did I get hit by a car? No, that's just like you said. Oh, all right, I guess I'll do this again. None of the things that humans get caught up on, like, oh, woe is me, why did that happen to me, kind of deal. They're like, all right. next.
Well,
But
it's
yeah,
part of our journey, to work things out. But if we get too caught up in our head, we don't find out either.
yes,
You have to lean back and let the journey happen, and then the pieces of the puzzle come together. Just
yeah,
like you said, you realize things, you follow your intuition, you get guidance, and then it falls into place. But if you try too hard, just like with telepathy, people get so anxious about doing it, they try too hard and they block all the communication. So a lot of it is relaxing into the journey. And that's one of the things we can learn from animals.
let me
That
ask you.
even when they die, they go, okay, I got it,
Right, and you always hear a lot of these stories of people who've lost animals, and then after a little while, they still hear them around,
Yeah,
or feel them around, especially like right after, and then
sure.
eventually it just fades away. But yeah, they kind of like either they hear the clicking of the nails or something
Yeah.
like, or if they
Or they
come on the
see them in
bed,
the corner of their eye, they
yes,
go, oh,
yes,
I'm sure that was him.
yes, yes,
Or
yes,
some
like
people feel them coming on the bed and they feel
yeah,
this weight on the
yes,
bed, uh, you know.
yes, yes, of course, like everything, like what their routine was, I guess,
Yeah.
that they still follow it.
Well, they also want to connect with you. It's
Hmm.
very important for you, to help you through your grief and your loss to be able to connect with your animal friend. And your animal friend knows that. So often, when they first go, besides the beautiful expansion they have of going into the spiritual realm and feeling the peace and the openness, they also look after you. They go, okay, I got to help my person through this hard time,
Yes,
and
yes,
I want you to hear
exactly.
me. So they help you through your grief if you will allow them to. And you'll feel their love, you'll feel their presence. It's a beautiful thing.
No, yeah. Let me ask you, and like we were talking about rescuing, like I've gone to the local shelter here, and I was looking for like, but I can't because all my dogs are like smaller. They're not little
Mm,
chihuahuas, but they're smaller, so I have to be like
yeah,
really, I can't bring in a big dog. But
yeah,
anyway, let me get to my point. When I was there, they had so many larger dogs that I
yeah,
was like, you know what? If even if I didn't have my other dogs, I guess I'm intimidated because I'm
yeah,
thinking, what if I can't, what if they're, sometimes you don't, even the pound
sure.
doesn't know the history on them. They were,
Sure.
if somebody's going to go, let's say, to a shelter or the local animal, is there anything that you recommend that people do when they're trying to find a connection?
Yeah, this is one thing that people call animal communicators about, is to find out, is this the right being for you?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a real connection? Are you just doing this out of, well, I really should do this?
Right.
Or are you doing this because it's a relationship? It's
Mm-hmm.
a special relationship. You have to meet the being that's right for you in your life. If you're feeling intimidated by a dog, that is not the right dog for you.
Right.
That
Exactly.
is
That's
not
what
a
I
good
mean.
sign.
Yeah.
You'll feel that the dog is right for you. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to be realistic. There are some dogs that are dangerous.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
They have been traumatized, or they have a history, or they've been bred to hurt
Yes.
other beings.
Hmm.
And you have to
Yes.
be very, very careful. So I would say regard your own physical situation too. Like I had Afghan hounds for uh, uh, almost 30 years, but then I got
Hmm.
to a place in my life I could no longer keep up with them.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no way. Before, I used to, take them for long runs, and they needed that. They needed to
Right.
run. Okay, so
Hmm.
then Spirit guided me and said, right, you're going to shift to a different kind of dog now. And I said, wow, because I've always been into them. And then I kept getting visions and dreams of the dog who was coming to me
Hmm.
next. And again, it was through a rescue. And it turned out this dog was part sighthound. She was a
Wow.
mix, but she was
Okay.
part sighthound. So it was like a continuation. She was small. She
Hmm.
was only 15 pounds, but it ran like the wind, but she always listened to me. Unlike Afghans who always go, come means see you later.
Right. Yeah. It's like, yeah. See, bye.
Because they have such a need. It's so much a part of them
Right.
to run, which I could always keep up with. And I did, we
Hmm.
had lots of adventures. But with my next dog, she loved to run, but she loved to look after me.
Yeah.
So she would always turn around. and come back and look after me. And she
Yeah.
preferred to look after me than to run,
Then to run.
which
Yeah.
which then I could handle that, at my
Sure.
age and condition, physical ability. I could handle that. And so, it's kind of natural to downsize as you get older,
Yeah.
if you, because
Sure.
you can either can't keep up with them, or they're so big they could pull
Yes.
you down, or
Oh,
you could get hurt
absolutely.
from having a dog that you can't. They can pull your arm out of the socket if they if
Yeah.
they
One
are
time I
on
was
the leash.
babysitting my son's American Bulldog, Arizona, and and I had her, even though I was on my, and she saw something, I don't know what it was.
Yeah,
She went and I went like, like
yeah,
she, I was it was unexpected, but she was such a strong dog
yeah.
that she
So
was
so
excited.
yeah, and with your question, I would say to people, be real on your physical situation, and then ask spirit. Ask your guidance. Okay, who is right for me? Please guide them to me,
Right.
guide me to them.
Yeah.
And they're already looking for you. They already know. And then
Right.
you get the message. And then instead of looking at the dogs that you think you should have or that are
Right.
right to adopt, because there's so many of them in the shelter, you go, no, it's a relationship. It's a life. It's a
Yes.
life, your life and their life. You got
Yeah.
to have the right relationship, or else it doesn't
Yes.
work. Everybody
Yes.
is stressed. Everybody can get hurt. So you find the one that's right for you, and it's total joy. It's,
Right. That
it's,
even though people you want to rescue, obviously if you go, but at the same
yeah,
time, it's just not a question of rescuing. It's got to be the connection with the right
exactly.
animal.
And
Yes.
then you find that, and then it builds. So maybe your journey is to grow with an animal who has been very traumatized, and you're going to
Hmm.
learn together, and you're going to get through your fears together. You're going to help each other. Or maybe your journey is you just need to play and have fun. So you got yourself a little playful dog who's going to make sure you get out
Right.
3 times a day for a good walk,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whatever it is to take care of you. But it's a incredibly special relationship, whether it's a dog, a cat, a bird, whoever it is. Listen, listen, and tune into your heart with your heart, not just with thinking, but with
Yes.
all your feeling, and go, does this feel good for both of us?
Right.
Are we both going to
Exactly.
be helped by the situation? Because otherwise, as it is with any relationship, are you going to go into a human relationship with somebody who is going to hurt you? Well,
Of course. Exactly.
people do, but is it the best thing?
And you know what? I'm glad you bring that up because I know some people that want to rescue an animal, and we're going to use the dog here, but it could be, and they almost go towards the most traumatized because they think this is the one that needs to be saved. But I think you made a very good point that sometimes certain animals, because of their experience, their breeding, or even how they've been trained,
Yeah,
you can't rescue them. You want to.
yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Oh,
But
I
yeah, how some
totally
people
see
go
what
to
you're
the
saying.
worst case scenario, and it's like your intentions are good,
Yeah.
but
It's not going to work. See,
yes,
you have to be practical on all levels: physical,
yes,
mental, spiritual, emotional. You have to be, is this a really viable relationship?
yeah,
Is there a possibility? Because otherwise you're not helping. It's just like hoarders, people who
yes.
hoard animals.
Hmm.
They have this idea. Again, it's thinking. They're not really getting the
Hmm.
whole picture. They have this
Yes.
idea. Okay, the more animals I take in, the better they are, and the
Yeah.
better I am. Well, then the animals are starving, they're
Oh,
sitting in
yeah.
their
A
crap,
really
you know,
unsanitary conditions and
horrible situations. I mean, I have seen it. Of course, I've met rescue animals who come from those
yes,
situations. Everybody is traumatized. They need a lot of help. The human
yes,
obviously needs help, and they
yep,
have to be rescued. Here, this
yes,
person again gets this idea: I just accumulate animals. You can't accumulate
yes. I've
animals.
seen that. I have seen that
It
where
doesn't work. So, the idea of numbers, oh, I'm going to rescue a couple of them. Well, can you manage a couple
yes,
dogs?
yes,
Is it right for you in your
yeah.
apartment?
Of course,
Can you manage
absolutely.
that?
That you're thinking like that, that
It's
that that your good intentions sometimes you have to,
yeah.
like you said, be practical. Besides your good intentions, be practical about your
Yeah. And then
situation.
the intentions actually get fulfilled in something good.
Yeah.
just like the people who take on too many animals and the animals, they can't take care of them, etc.
Yes.
Okay, that doesn't work. But if you take in the one animal that is right for you,
Right.
everybody lives a good life.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a good situation.
Yeah. The one that you picked. One time, this was when they still had Greyhound racing here in Florida, and they retire them after like about 3 years, and you can adopt one. You can, they
Yes.
because they destroy some of these animals. So I remember I did the process, and the lady calls me back. She goes, "Well, do you have any small animals like?" And at that time, I said, "Well, I have some cats which I had rescued because
Yeah.
they would drop them off at this park that I would jog at." I said, "Yeah, I have three cats. They were outdoor,
Yeah.
indoor cats." She goes, "Look, they've been trained so much to chase small animals
Yeah.
that they will go after your cats."
Yeah.
I said, "Thank you for letting me know. I would love to do this, but I got to
Yeah.
take care of my cats."
That's real. See, that's being real.
Yes, she
Yeah.
says that's the way they're trained. I mean, they
Yeah.
don't a small animal, especially like a cat or any animal that darts around, to them,
Yeah.
they've been trained. They'll go
Yeah.
for it, you know. And it was like, nope. I wish I could, but I can't,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understand what you're talking about as far as what good intentions are versus the reality of your
And
situation.
sometimes people have to learn from making the choice that doesn't turn out so well, but it can be a real hard learning.
Oh
And
yeah,
once you've learned that, then don't do it again. you
sure,
know,
sure, sure,
for your
absolutely. And you see
sake,
this
for
even
the
with the
animal's
cats.
sake,
Yeah, even
pardon?
with the cats, you see a lot of cat people that have cat
Yeah,
that the cats like proliferate like, "Rrr," and
yeah,
it's like, you know, when I rescued those three cats, which happened to be females of all things, as soon as they were old enough, zoop, off they
yeah,
went to get spayed, like, zoop.
sure.
And they were very, by the way, when I went to Miami last 2 weeks ago, they're still around. They're both 13, 14 years old,
Mhm.
give or take. They're looking at them in Cali, and they're like coming up to me. But I'm saying is, even though they're outside, mostly outside, but they've got a porch and
Yeah,
they're very happy.
yeah,
But I did the right thing, which is to get them spayed immediately.
yeah,
And,
exactly.
and I know you were talking about some people that keep the cats, and it's like, man, I love kittens, but it's a
Yeah,
problem,
yeah,
when they
yeah.
become feral.
You have to see the results of your actions.
Let me
The
ask you something. Now that we talk about cats, how is it communicating with cats? Because I know everybody says cats are weird, like, but I love,
They're not weird at all. They're absolutely wonderful.
I
All
know.
animals are individuals, obviously their different species are different, but at the same time, you're talking to a fellow being.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I have three cats, so I absolutely love cats. And
Yes.
I've communicated with thousands of cats, and they're all unique beings who are incredible helpers, incredibly wise beings that you can learn a tremendous amount of from. So, what can I say?
Yeah. No, because everybody sometimes is, they think, oh, dogs, but no, cats are weird, and cats, just to walk away and don't pay attention, and
Yeah,
whatever. And it's like, yeah, yeah. I have she's around here somewhere. She'll pop up. I rescued a kitten back in October. We were out in this country place in the middle of nowhere, and she fell out of somebody had parked one of those containers, the 18-wheeler containers, and I guess Mama had her in there. Mama had left her the other kittens. She came out. She was meowing, meowing. She had just opened her eyes, and the guy who owned the land, he goes, "Nah, don't worry about it. Mom will come back any minute." And I'm looking. I climbed in there. I said, "Okay, maybe the litter is in here, and Mom will come back." Nobody, everybody was gone. I said, "You know what? She's gonna get picked off because it was wildlife out there."
yeah.
So my husband's looking at me like, "Here you go." And it's like, "Yeah, here I go." So yeah, I bottle fed her. I took her because I said, "You know what? Even if Mama's around, if I leave her out here, she's gonna get
Yeah,
something's gonna eat her or whatever." So yeah, and now he's crazy about her. That's
of
the
course.
thing. He's looking at me like, oh, and then he's like, where's she? He calls her Boo Boo. Where's Boo Boo? That's not her
There's
name. Her
so
name is
many
Marnie.
stories of people who didn't know really anything about cats, but they just had ideas about cats.
Yes.
And then a cat adopts them,
Yeah,
and they take
exactly.
them they
Yeah.
take them on hikes with them, they travel around with them, they do all kinds of things with them. You see these
Yes.
on the internet,
I
and
love
they
him. Yeah, I love the
I
story.
never I the people will say, I never knew. I never knew. And of
Yeah.
course they didn't. You have to have a personal experience.
Yes, yes. It's really funny because it's like he's like when he was looking at me, I remember with the cat and I'm looking, he's looking at you could tell he's looking at me with his arms folded like I can tell you have all the signs. You're gonna take that kitten. And I was like, but and he's like, don't worry, their mom will come back. And I'm like, but wait, I don't see mom. He already knows. And now he's like, he's crazy about her. He's like, and she comes and sits on his chair like on top, and so yeah, there's like again, like you talk about with the animals, what your expectations are, and then you
Yes,
get
and
pleasantly
you just
surprised.
you kind of need to shift gears, and when you look at all beings as fellow beings,
Yes,
rather than looking at their costume, it's just the same thing with ideas about people. If you stop looking at them as bodies and look at them as
yes,
fellow beings, then you communicate a heart to heart, soul to soul, and you have a different relationship. So the same goes with animals, whether they're an elephant or a dog or a slug. If you
yes,
look at them as a fellow being, then you start to have a connection and a
yes,
relationship, and you have some respect. And then you can start to see your blinders come off,
yeah, yep,
and you
yep.
start to see, oh my goodness, there's an amazing being here, and I'm going to learn from
Mhm.
them.
Yes, yes. I think that a lot of people don't. How's this? I'm going to say a lot of times I think people leave that in childhood. That's why
Yeah,
when I asked you as you grew up, because I think kids with animals, and then they grow up and they become practical. How's that? And I'm not saying anything wrong against being practical, because on the contrary,
yeah,
but I don't know, they just don't, they leave that behind, that thing
yeah,
about the animal connection kind of deal
yeah, yeah.
and things like that. So yeah, now you said also something very interesting that about connections with plants or with
Hmm.
trees,
Hmm.
that it's not just living things as in what we think of as living things. There's more to
As the
it than
Native Americans say, everything is alive,
yeah.
everything communicates. So you can communicate to trees, to mountains, to rivers, to the clouds. When you start opening up, you'll find that there's life everywhere, and it's the
Yes,
same life that's in you, and
yes.
it permeates everything. And you can learn from all beings, and it's a wonderful place to be in. It's a
Okay.
place of inclusion. It's a place where you never feel alone.
Hmm.
There's always beings around who are doing their part in the whole of life, and who also
Okay.
can relate to you. They can't relate to you if you don't relate to them. If you shut them
Sure.
out, of course, they can't relate to you. But if you open to them, you'll find, wow, there's a living being here. There's life, and it's beautiful.
Have you ever had a situation, whether it's an animal or just where you've gotten like a warning? How's that? And the reason I'm asking is that most people sometimes they're blind to it about
A
something.
warning from an animal? Are you
Yeah, when an
saying?
animal or maybe
Oh
something
yeah,
that.
yeah. When I travel, I like to do camping, and
Okay.
I go to various places, and I often like to camp in unusual places, not necessarily campgrounds. Although now,
Hmm.
at this stage of the game, I'm camping more in campgrounds. But many times I'll be going along, and I'll tell you a particular instance. I was going down this road of somewhere in the mountains. I think it was in Idaho. And I was going down this road, and it was starting to get dark, and I really needed to find a place to camp. And I thought, well, this road looks good. Maybe I can find a place here. There's a river nearby. I'll pull in. And I immediately got the message from Spirit,
Hmm.
no, not here. Do not turn there. Go a half a mile up the road and turn right. And I said, so I pulled back, because I was
Hmm.
about to turn in. I pulled
Right.
back. I went a half a mile up. It was by this time dark. I
Okay.
pulled into this place that was like a U shape, big driveway, and I couldn't see anything in the dark, but I knew there was a river somewhere nearby, and there were trees around. So I just camped. I camped in at that time I had a van I camped in. And in the morning, I woke up, I got out, And there was this huge tree right nearby and the river, and above me were eagles nesting.
Wow. How
This is where
cool.
spirit directed me to be.
Yeah.
I looked up and I went, "Oh my gosh, there's eagles.
Yeah.
Eagles nesting here." These were my campmates were
Okay.
eagles. And I went, "Yes, I've gotten warnings at other times in my life, don't go
Mm-hmm.
here or this isn't safe,
And
go
right, and you never
here."
know why, but you just follow it because you're like,
Yeah, and if you don't follow it, you'll find out why, and I'm not interested. I already
right,
know.
exactly. You know how some people say,
Yeah,
well, or
I'm
like,
not
oh, it's
interested
just my
in
imagination, you
learning
know?
that lesson, please. I've had enough experience in my life, and plus I get such a good experiences like this.
Yes.
This one where the spirit directed me to go to this place where the eagles were was totally quiet. When I went to sleep, it was totally quiet. The stars were out. It looked beautiful. And when I got up early in the morning, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, eagles above me. Wow.
Right, and that's the thing. Well, you know what? And people don't realize, unless you live in a rural area, when you go to one of these places, when it's dark, it's dark. You
Yeah,
can't,
yeah.
people, if you live in a city or a town where there's ambient lighting, you
Right.
never realize how dark
It's very
is.
dark, and that's why I always made it a policy. Of course, I go
Right. So
to a
you're
lot
out
of
there and there's
out,
nothing,
yeah, to get a camping camp place while I still can see, but by
Yes.
that time it was dark.
Yeah. Let me tell you, you're brave. Were you out there by yourself?
Yeah. Well, I
I
had
why
my
did I know
I
you were gonna
no,
say
no, I
yes?
had my dog. I had my dogs with me.
Okay, but still,
I had
still,
two dogs. No, but I've done this all my life, and
okay.
I've usually had dogs with me, and at that time it was large dogs. But I've camped with
Yeah.
my small dogs too. I mean,
Yeah.
they'll take care of me too, but not in the same way, of course. But
Yes.
no, for me, I feel very guided. I feel very taken care of. I communicate with the trees. I communicate with the land. I communicate with spirit, my own
Okay.
spiritual guidance, and follow it. And I feel very taken care of. And so I always run into people who just do the same. They take care of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, I have fantastic experiences because I follow the spiritual guidance.
Right. And the reason why I asked you is that sometimes people have these flashes of intuition or like you
Yeah.
said, communication, and they dismiss it as my imagination, or I'm just wigging out and like, oh, it's getting dark, so I'm telling myself this, and then and they don't pay attention to it
Yeah.
until something happens. It's like, Bigfoot
Yeah.
comes out and snatches them or something. I'm just making stuff up, but you know what
No,
I'm
no,
talking.
it's true. And I have avoided situations and seen what would happen had I been in those
Really?
situations, or I've gone and, where I'm traveling and I go into areas where I don't know if they're safe or not, but I'm starting to feel really creepy. And Spirit
Right.
says, you need to go 50 miles further. Keep
Right.
going, even though it's dark, 50 miles and you'll be okay. So I just do it.
Right. Right. And I'm glad you say that you never stay to find out. And that's the thing, when you dodge the bullet, the very act of dodging it, you never find out what the bullet was because
But
you're like,
sometimes I
that's
sort
it.
of feel it, I feel it, or I get the picture of what it might be. And I really don't hang around to find out the reality of
Right.
it. I mean, what's the
Yeah.
point? I'm guided to really good experiences, so it's good.
May I ask you something? Have you ever run across, how they say sometimes a dog or an animal will sense something about a person
Yeah.
that the human doesn't? Have you ever had one of your animals react to a person, not in a good way, I'm saying,
Yes.
that which you're not aware of? What do you do? Do you trust them or do you try to figure out what is it about this person that they just don't?
Yeah, I've had both experiences where the
Okay.
animals have responded so positively. It was like a right on, including
Okay.
to a person who turned out to be a marriage partner, where
Okay.
my dog just said and just melted into him. And I
Okay.
knew everything was okay. And
Okay.
then there was another situation later on in my life where I was with a person
Mm-hmm.
who it was more about spiritual lessons
Right. Yeah.
and I disregarded. I mean, there were several reactions that my animals had, and I just kind of disregarded and even apologized for the animals,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because I was so in the middle of this relationship. But it was
Right.
something I needed to go through. But I had some hard lessons to learn from it that my animal friends were trying to tell me, hey, this might not be such a good thing.
Right, right, right. And you only see that in hindsight when
Exactly.
you think,
But
oh,
but a lot of
now they
times
were reacting that way.
But a lot of times in on the spiritual journey, well, I saw it at the time, but on the spiritual journey, you need to go through those things.
Yeah, yeah,
I needed to learn those things. I needed to learn about the dark side of humanity and to
sure.
face it better. And
Yes.
so I look at it as, yes, I was also being taken care of. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, I also needed to learn something difficult.
Yeah,
And so it
yeah,
was all okay. Again, the pieces of the puzzle come together sometimes later.
sure,
But I find that animals, okay, there's two sides. The
right,
animals can regard out of their feeling, and it's exactly on, and they can also react from their trauma too.
sure.
So you have to look at that. So you have animals who are very traumatized, they're terrified of people.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't react well to most people. Some
Right,
people they react better to. You're always happy when that
right.
happens because, okay, they feel safer. But they
Yes.
don't feel safe, so you can't really say, well, I'm going to follow the animal's intuition. Well, the animal's intuition is kind of blocked at that point because they've been abused
Or
and
or
they're
and so,
operating out of fear.
and you know
And
what? You're thinking, okay, well, my dog even traumatized. He's pretty okay with most people, but that one person is the
yeah,
one that
yeah.
they're like, there's something about that person that's like,
Yeah, and then
mm-mm.
just look at that and take a look at that for yourself. And and then you can also ask your dog if you communicate with them
Yeah,
and say, what is it? What did you see? What did you feel? And then you can find out whether it's from their trauma that that person reminded them of the person who used to kick them, or
mm-hmm.
that it's from, well, they had an element in them that was a little bit scary that you
Or
should watch out
personality
for.
traits, something about that person, not the
Yeah.
whole person, but there was maybe
Yeah,
something they pick up
exactly.
on
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
maybe you don't
But
recognize that they're like,
yeah.
you
So
remind me of
these are the kind
somebody.
of things you can find out if you communicate with animals telepathically, you can find out more about. But again, some things on our life journeys we're not meant to know exactly at that time. We're meant to learn something that is sometimes
Sure.
difficult.
Well, no, no, and I know sometimes, let's face it, we all want to like avoid pain.
Yeah, of
But,
course.
as you go through life, you realize some things, as unpleasant as they were at the moment, you look back at them and you go, well, I learned a lot from that
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
You realize that but, heading into it, which is, I guess, sometimes where it's better not to know things because there's no way around it.
Right.
For somebody that wants to try to communicate with animals, what do you suggest would be the first steps in getting on that?
Well, in order to communicate, you need to be able to listen. And
Mm-hmm.
people are often so busy in their own minds, they can't open up to listening. And the
Mm-hmm.
telepathic senses are just like the physical senses, only they're very fine tuned. So you can get from your animal, you can get their messages, you can get images, you can get what they're tasting, what they're smelling, all these things, but not if you're real busy in your own mind. So the first thing
Right.
is to get quiet. Spend time with animals just being quiet and opening to them, listening to
Yes.
them in an open way and see what happens. So I
Yep.
explain all this in my book, Animal Talk, and you can get
Okay.
it on my website, animaltalk.net. So people, there are ways to learn, and that's sort of gives you the foundations of how to learn, how to get quiet, how to open to your senses. What are telepathic senses? These are the things that once you learn, people often say, well, I've done that. I
Okay.
operated by knowing. I knew what was happening with my horse. Oh, I
Yeah.
get it. I get pictures, or I get it. I get messages, or I get this, or I get that. I get
Right.
feelings. So people start to learn what it is,
Okay.
and then they start to recognize it in themselves. Then they learn
Yes.
how to get quieter so you can be receptive and listen. It's just like
Okay.
listening to people, really, because often people can't listen to people because they're so busy in their own heads.
Yeah.
They're thinking, what is this person thinking
And
about
I'm gonna,
me?
you
Or
know
what
what?
am I going to say?
And I'm gonna blame this also. Right there,
Yeah,
this. We've
yeah,
been alive long enough to know that there was a time period where we didn't have diesel around,
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and the reason why I say this is that this, as in this telephone,
Distractions.
has
Yeah,
made us available 24/7, like
yeah,
instant. Before somebody called you
Yeah.
and it rang, and they would call later or the next day. It wasn't like that 24/7 access. I
Yeah.
think has and this is between yeah, what you're talking
Yeah.
about, the distraction
It
and
creates a barrier to
yeah,
really opening and listening. We if we are always rushed and we
yes,
always have to feel we have to respond instantly, that isn't real conducive to really fully listening to another being.
sure,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's like, and I think it's like with everything else, it's just like you need to quiet your mind, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of people have a problem quieting their mind
Yeah.
because they're either, that to-do list, they're while they're doing this, they're already thinking, what am I gonna do next 5 minutes later?
Right.
Or, they've got the to-do list in their mind and they're always on a treadmill of, you know, and the quiet thing is like, what do you mean it's quiet? Like, what am I gonna put in there? Like that's why they say I think sometimes people sometimes get the best ideas like when they're taking a shower. Because when
Yeah.
they kind of empty up their mind, there's nothing else you can do. You got to take the shower. So
Right.
sometimes this is when they actually get like aha moments. Because
Yeah.
you'd be surprised when you quiet your mind what pops in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if you're something, like just like, you'll, I don't know but for me, sometimes when I wake up in the morning, usually it's all of a sudden like something will ding, like it's
Yeah.
because my mind is quiet. Like all of a sudden that something is like, oh, or I was thinking, I need to find whatever, stuff that, and then all
Yeah.
of a sudden I'll wake up and I'll go, or I had something I was thinking about or a question or something. And it's like, boop, it pops in. It's like, okay, that's
There it
what's because your
is.
mind was
Right.
quiet. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So now what do you have? You have three cats or in a dog or
I
just
have
three?
three cats, a dog. I have a Sonoran Desert tortoise
Oh,
and
you
a flock
pay.
of chickens. And when you talked about your chickens in the
Oh,
beginning, I said I've
yes.
had chickens since the 1980s. And
Okay.
I absolutely love chickens. I adore my chickens. They're very underrated. When people
Oh, yeah.
realize, when I have done the courses at my home, because
Uh-huh.
before the internet, I did everything in person. And when
Yeah.
people came, they went, "Oh, I just didn't realize." Because again, they have ideas. Chickens are dumb. Chickens are
Yeah.
this. Chickens are to
Yeah.
eat. Whatever. They're not really beings. And then they meet my chickens, or meet any
I,
chickens, but
right.
they meet them in a new way as fellow beings, and they go, "Oh my gosh, this chicken is communicating to me all about things I need to know." And I'm going, "Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're listening now, and you don't
Yeah.
have these ideas in the way. You have to." This is another element to communication, is setting aside those preconceptions so you can actually meet a being fresh and see who they are.
Yes. 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 The animals, like even like the chickens and everything like that. Like you said, people have this idea, chickens are chickens, like, oh, it's pea brain or something like that.
Yeah.
And no, they find ways of communicating. I mean, my
They're
animals,
so bright. They're
I have
so
guinea
amazing.
fowl out there, and sometimes I'm like, you dummies, come here, because they're always getting into things they shouldn't. It's like my husband every something goes, "What did you say?" I go, I'm talking to the whoever's there. Whether it's the chickens. I have these conversations, but loud ones. I don't think my neighbors, but I guess everybody knows. Like, or they see me. Sometimes they'll fly. My guineas will fly over the fence, and I got them. They were like a Mother's Day gift when they were real chicks, so I brought them all up. So I can't, I'm always worried
But
about
I'm sure with your intuitive ability and your connection with the spiritual realm, that you have gotten a lot of communication from
Oh
animals.
yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, but still, that doesn't stop me from running around in boxer shorts like pajamas because all of a sudden my husband will call me and goes, "There's a couple of guineas on the other side of the fence." It's like, so cool because there's always I tell him there's always some in the bunch. There's always two that are like dumb and dumber. So you'd see me and my neighbors like they'll pass by because around here it's very rural and there's like that's that crazy lady in the boxer shorts and the t-shirt running after, going like this to the guineas. Get inside, get inside. Because I'm telling you. But yeah, you develop this thing with your animals, and I know exactly what you mean. Even something like birds, and I mean, I have other birds there. I have pigeons. But that, like you said, almost like when humans communicate just by looking at each other.
Hmm.
Like you said, when you know somebody well
Yeah.
enough that they look at you and you look at them, and they're like, okay, you're like, yeah.
Right. Right.
The same thing I think happens with the animals. Like once you
Mhm.
realize what's going on, the dialogue, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be convoluted. And
Yeah.
I even know I'll look at one of my animals just like this. I will look at him and I go, "Oh, something's going on with you.
Yeah.
You're not feeling well or something." It's just like,
You got it.
and I've woken up sometimes at 2 in the morning because I do have some predators out here, and I've gotten up like awake, awake. And you see me because I'm telling you, I have those little lanterns, the ones that you put um, like a forehead lantern.
Right,
And
right.
I'm traipsing out there at 2 in the morning because something's telling me somebody's
Yeah.
around here, and I have
Good
also a
for you.
relationship with an
Yeah.
owl out here.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, here's me. No, get out of here. Because of course I've lost chickens, to
Yeah.
the I have big owls out here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely, I know exactly what that's about. And I think that's really important what we were talking about, Penelope, because like I said, so many people now are so close to their animals because that they see them, that it's like, okay, the next step is the communication part with them, and they don't do it because they just don't think it's possible. How's that?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you need to get past these societal ideas
Yeah.
about what is possible because it enriches your life so much to be able to communicate and you grow together more. It opens up both of your capacities to grow together. And your relationship just gets deeper and expands. I mean, what could
Oh
be
yeah.
better than that?
Yeah. Oh no, I'm telling you. Let me see. Where's Dixie? Dixie. No. Oh, you. Oh no. Everybody's like, where did Dixie go? It's like, your kids, when you have certain children that like, oh, I haven't seen so and so for a while. Oh my God, where are they? I'm like, it's like you're like, wait, you're always like, oh, hey baby, come here. Yeah, they're all underneath here, and everybody's like very quiet.
Yeah.
God knows, I gotta go
They're
look
all
for her.
listening. They're
And
all
no,
listening.
believe it or not, they do. This is their favorite room because this is where I do my work. And in the mornings,
Yeah,
they all come over here and they're so happy because this is like,
they're just helping you out. They're contributing
yeah,
their energy. You can feel it.
yeah, yeah, they do.
I
This is
feel
like,
your support crew.
oh yeah, no, you have no idea. The support crew,
I do. I
my
have an
entourage,
idea.
because it's like, how the stars, they walk around, the celebrities, and they got their entourage. Well, I've got my own entourage. It's like one of those things, but no. So I'm definitely, we're on the same thing. Are you going to be working on any books or anything like that,
Well,
or
I have a
classes?
number of books I'm working on,
Okay,
but they've been in that stage for a while. But right
okay,
now, I'm teaching with the Shift Network, and I've been teaching. One course is the foundation course on communication with animals that you can get the recordings of and learn how to
okay,
communicate from the beginning. It's a very, very good course. And then I'm also teaching a professional course, or for people who want to just enrich their whole life, a certification program that's going to start in September. And that's a big program. Goes on for 6 months. But for people who want to just start, we have a foundation course. And then I also, of course, have my books. And I have many other things that are free to learn on
okay,
YouTube, on my blogs. I give people a lot of information on my website, animaltalk.net. And there are a lot of ways to start. And by starting, I mean to wake up to what you already have
sure,
and what's already within you and
yeah,
how to develop it. This isn't something new to people. This is something that's been within you your whole life.
sure,
And people will start to recognize it, just like you already know a lot about what
yeah,
your abilities are. Well, a lot of people, when they recognize it, then the abilities just expand. So
yeah,
that's what I'm interested in, is the world gets better, everybody gets happier when we
sure,
expand in our heart to heart, soul to soul connections. And
absolutely,
this is a beautiful thing.
absolutely. Thank you so much. It has been wonderful to speak to you, Penelope. God,
Wonderful
that goes
talking
with.
to you,
I
Marlene.
want to
Thank
wish you
you.
the best of luck. And
Thank
again,
you.
I'll put a link to your website on the credits of the show.
Thanks.
And if you could repeat it for my podcast listeners, what's your website address?
Animaltalk.net.
Animaltalk.net.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much and take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. As you can tell, animal lovers of the world unite. Yes, that's me. Can you tell? You know how people get about their grandchildren? That's like me. No, I have grandchildren. I love my grandchildren, believe me. But, you know, your animals, they, how's this? I mean, when you really care for an animal, sometimes you end up worrying about them, because you want to take care of them. And I hate to say it nowadays, especially and I'm just going to go with a dog. I'm not even going to go into the realm of livestock or other animals just to take care of them. The vets, it's prohibitive. How much and I think I know of people that have said, "Hey, I would get another animal, another cat, another dog, even," and they'll say, "But man, I can't afford to get this other animal." Because sometimes, forget just even because nowadays they have a lot of places, clinics that you could take them to for like standard stuff. You know, when they get their rabies shot, or when they're young and they get their series of distempers or whatever's pertinent to that breed or that animal type. But God forbid if you ever have an emergency, something happens to your animal, and it could be like, oh, it's incredibly expensive. It doesn't have to, and by the way, it doesn't even have to be that complicated. It does not have to be that complicated. And sometimes I'll give you an example. Many years ago, my husband rescued a Rottweiler. All right, full-grown Rottweiler, Teddy, that's his name. And he wasn't, he was maybe 3, 4 years old when he got him. Okay. And you know what? The rescue group, it was a very small animal rescue group who had him. And they had said, well, we'll send you the the medical his medical records. I said, okay, perfect. They brought him over for a test run like on a weekend. Everything was fine. And I kept asking, hey, send me the medical so that I could give it to our vet. That way there's a history on this animal. I never got it from them. Caveat emptor for anybody, unless you're going to the local animal control or something, always get, if there's a record, especially if it's an animal, an adult animal, see if we could get the medical records. Sure enough, about a year and a half later, he develops, we realize he's got this bulge like on his right side, like behind his front leg, and it's growing. And I guess it had been there a while. It's just that the Rottweilers are big dogs. They're husky dogs. So it wasn't that noticeable by the time. But bottom line, make a long story short, we took him to the vet. The vet says, hey, he's got some type of growth in there. You know, the surgeon cost us a bit of money, and I'm being kind, very kind. And they pulled out a mass that was here on his side, and the surgeon told us, oh, no, we got everything out. It was like a big thing. So sure enough, I was like, okay, well, it was prohibitive, but okay. You know what? He did live like maybe a year. In other words, he did, it didn't grow back, but he just got started getting skinnier and skinnier, and we were at our wits end. We took him to the vet. We were, like food, anything that he ended up dying like within a year. So at that time, maybe it was maybe 5 years, 6 years, which is that's even for a Rottweiler, that's still. My point being that what I was originally getting to, that a lot of people get scared because if their animal ever gets sick, which it can happen to any animal, you know, the vet bill can deep six you, and then you're faced with a dilemma like, what if I can't treat my animal? Same thing. Around here, a lot of people have horses. There's a lot of people sometimes to rescue horses. I wish I could do it, but you know what stops me? The cost of keeping the animal, even with just what do they call it, like just normal veterinary attention. I'm not talking anything extraordinary or medical, just to keep, have them looked at by a vet. It's like, no, I can't do that. And I've had several people like, hey, because I've got land. You would be great. You would, it's like, no, I wish I could. And just getting back to what Penelope was talking about. And this is coming from I want to rescue the world of animal person. that you realize you can't rescue them all, and you got to be responsible about the animals that you do have or that you're going to rescue. You know, that it's not beyond your means, all right, or your, you know, where you live. But in other words, as much as you have want to have a kind heart, you got to be realistic about it, how, where I live. Like she said, if you live in an apartment, or how much money can I spend on this animal, or if I've only got, you know, enough to like take care of one animal or two, but maybe three is going to max me out. You got to be really realistic about things like this, um, because you know. And nowadays, how's this? Even now, even with the food, and I'm going to give you my own story of this. You know, you know, once upon a time there was just dog food. Period. Dog food, dog food, dog food. Nowadays, you know, there's this kind of food with this thing, and then the live dog food and the dead dog food. Because if it's dry, it's not this and it's not that. And you know, I'll be perfectly right now. You know, I give my dogs grain-free food. You know, the not the most expensive, but I have a friend of mine. She tells me, you know what? When I was growing, we had two Dobermans, and my mom fed them the cheapest dog food that they had on the grocery shelves, and both dogs lived to like 17 years old, which for Dobermans is pretty long. So, you know, some of this sometimes you get caught up with the um, premium dog food thing, like, oh, if I don't feed my animal, well, again, I'm using dogs as an example. It could be anything. But now you go to shelves, and for all the different animals, there's the you know, end of the totem pole food versus the premium stuff. Like it's like I don't even buy stuff this expensive for myself. And you know, you kind of feel like, oh my God, you know, if I can't feed my animal, this blah, blah. Sometimes I think that it's just like kids, you know. If you take good care of them and you love them and you show them affection and you protect them, yeah, they'll be okay. They'll be okay. You know, you don't have to feed them the most expensive food or get them the most expensive whatever. Same thing, you know, we have the cat, you know, and she's she plays with the empty boxes. I receive something that's shipped, and you know, and I'll open up a box, and you see her just playing in the box. And sometimes, you know, I've gone to the stores and they have all these little cat toys, and I mean, these my dogs. I have one, the Bubba. He's into his woobies, but even then, I buy him at a discount because he leaves them in the yard. And you know what? And my point being, people sometimes spend a boatload of money on little toys and stuff for the animals, and they behave just like children. They play with the empty box and a wrapper. You just spent 10 or 15 or 20 bucks on a toy or something, and it's like, again, a lot of these things sometimes that we're engineered through through consumerism, like, oh, you need this, especially when it comes to animals, and we're caught up with our animals, and we want to take care of our animals, and we want to have the best for our animals. Ah, you know, if that's stopping you, like saying, well, you know what? If I didn't spend X amount of money on this, all this extra stuff, could I have another animal? Yeah. Let's say if you're looking at it from a budget thing, you know, how much is this going to cost me or not cost me? Sometimes keeping it simple, like I said, you know, you keep an animal safe and warm and dry, and you give them food, you give them water, you give them love, you give them attention, blah, 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 blah. Let me tell you something. Your animal will be fine. Your animal will be fine. They have no idea sometimes that whether what you're getting them is the you know, the brand name, whatever the brand name of whatever product it is. In their world, it doesn't matter. They don't know about that. They don't know about brand names. Yeah. So yeah, as you can tell, as a matter of fact, let me see if I can find the this is let me see if I can find one of my I had one with where I had a bald eagle and some turkey buzzards fighting over an animal that got hit. I think it was a raccoon that got hit on the road. And it's really funny because there's a bunch, I mean, there must have been a dozen of the turkey vultures. And they nobody can lift up, I think it was a raccoon. It was like even the eagle couldn't lift it and take it. So here's this one bald eagle, and he's surrounded by like a dozen turkey buzzards. And he's like, I'm not leaving. And they're like, yeah, but you're outnumbered. He's like, I'm not leaving. And like everybody's like around this, you know, this corpse is, you know, and it's like, okay. And he's like, you know, he's like the white head, and he's standing there in the middle of all these turkey buzzards, and they're all around him, and you could tell. It's like, and I was like, okay, you guys, you know, and by the way, I feel bad, but that's the way things go. That, as a matter of fact, for the turkey vultures around here, that's what they're good at. They're scavengers. They take care of um, making sure that all these animals that die, either get hit by or just they just die. They clean. They're the cleaners. They are the cleaners. So let me see if I can find. Let me see. Let me see if I can find my. Okay, I'm gonna give you. This is my. This is something. Let me see if I can get this going. Hold on. Let me see. Hold on a minute. Hold on. Hold on. Slow the roll. Hold on a minute. Let me see. This is me getting all my my pack. Okay. Hold on. Let's see. Where Here we go. Here we go. All right, here we go. All right. Go. Yeah. That's me. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I take them to do when I take the trash out, they go on a ride with me. Yeah. Here we go. As you can tell, see, yes, that is yes, that is that's like I'm kidding you. Believe me. So yeah. So yeah, with animals, that's why I understand so well what Penelope was talking about as far as I've got enough therapy that's coming out my ears. But no, all kidding aside. I know that normally, people, how's this? Yeah, you see people with therapy dogs or therapy whatever it is, with them in the stores. But I guess my point is they've always been around. You just didn't take them to the stores or to the restaurants with you. But I think um, animals have provided therapy, different animals. I'm not talking here just to the people always. And they just weren't called that. They weren't called that. But I think people have always had that with their animals. And yet the truth was, it's like, hey, back then or before maybe the last few years, you just didn't go everywhere with your dog or your cat or your alligator or your pig or your bearded dragon because nowadays anything and everything is a therapy animal. Um, I'll tell you what, though, one time I was visiting New York and I went to eat at a Vietnamese restaurant right across from Central Park. And I had my little applehead chihuahua. She passed away already, Kwee. And I had her on a carrier. She went all over the United States with me, Washington, everywhere. And I had like this little. It looked like a purse, really, but she was very small. And it was so funny because we sat there, and I was like, okay. And I put her, and she was a smart little thing. She'd just be quiet. And it was like middle of the day, like lunch was going on, and it was a restaurant. They served us, and I would get food, and then I'd get a little piece of meat, and I'm like putting it down to the side. I put the purse over it, hung it on the back of the chair like nobody could see it, and I would like give her a little piece of meat. She didn't make a sound, like she knew if I keep a low profile, I can stay here and I'm getting fed pieces of meat. So yeah, she went and I'm telling you, they would not have, if I said, "Oh, can I bring my dog in here?" They would have said, "No, you can't." But yeah, and of course she was very small. She was fit in that carrier that I had on my, but yeah, I took her all over the place with me. All over the place. I'm in front of the Lincoln Memorial and here's my dog. I'm in front of the White House and here's my dog. I'm in the Central Park and I'm here with my dog. So yeah, I do dumb stuff like that. So anyway, guys, I hope you like the show with Penelope. I like I said, I'll put a link to her website on the credits of the show. Check it out. You can tell she's been doing this for a really long time. Let me tell you, she's a brave lady. I love to camp, but that thing about going off by myself, I don't know. I I don't know. Maybe I've seen too many of these people disappearing in national parks. And I'm like, what? No, I'm very respectful, like of nature. How's that? You know, very respectful. And like I said, I back in the 80s, I went to one time to Yellowstone, and we were staying in a cabin, but I had looked at the possibilities of staying in a tent, because they had different areas of the park, right? And of course, it was during the summer, it was June, like because otherwise you can't, it's too cold. They were always talking about, the precautions that we're going to stay in a tent or if you're going to stay some type of a covered thing that with the animals and this and that. And they were, and it just so happens right before we go into the park, we stopped at this like a gift shop. They call themselves a trading post, and we're talking with the people, and they're saying, well, oh yeah, and I said, oh, the bears, and they go, oh yeah, they fly the bears away, like out of the area where the tourists are, but every once in a while, like just about every summer, they come back and you hear about stuff happening. Oh, okay, well that was like a story, whatever. We get in, we put our stuff away, we're gonna take a hike. By the way, I'm carrying my daughter on my back. She's like 6 months old, and I see this like a watchtower, and I tell my husband, hey, let's go over there. Let's we'll take turns. You go up, and then I'll and we're going down this trail, and I'm looking down, and I see something waving, like reddish waving, like that. I was like, what is that? All of a sudden, like like when you start trying to make that happen, like okay, how do I? Then I take a really good look at, and it's a grizzly bear that's scratching itself. And that's what I'm seeing, this reddish hair fur, whatever it was, because it's longer, waving, it's scratching itself. I was like, what? I'm telling my husband, back up, back up, back up, back up. We just got here, and sure enough, here's a grizzly down this trail. Like, okay. My point being that after that experience, and also seeing like buffalo bison that they're huge. They were as big as my minivan. But back then it was like the little Chevy vans. It was like I'm telling you, you never understand how big these animals are till you see them up close. Then you're like, what? I guess my point being, she's brave because I'm very respectful of nature. And when you're out in the wild and by yourself, it's like, man, hats off to you, lady. Hats off to you, lady. So yeah, I've gone camping, but it's like, yeah, like three doors down from, they have, maybe somebody from the campground or they have somebody from the Fish and Wildlife that, they have a place there, that, that I'm kind of like a coward that way. So anyway, guys, I hope you like this show. I've got a lot of interesting guests coming back and new ones coming on. Go to miamighostchronicles.com. Come to mpelliser.com. You'll find links to everything. You can sign up for my newsletter. You find links to the videos, to the podcast, to everything on there. Okay, so please, thank you again for coming and spending this time with me. I hope you like this interview with Penelope Smith, and I will be back soon with a lot more interesting guests. Till next time, take care.